they usually went when troubles arose, namely places like the United States, the borders were now closed. And so the Jews who were fearing and fleeing persecution, their options began to narrow where to go. And the one option which was open to them was, of course, to go to Palestine. And so beginning in the mid-1930s, large numbers of Jews start going to Palestine. And at this point, the Arabs, the Palestinian Arabs in Palestine, they begin to realize Zionism is no longer a theory. It is now becoming a practical reality. The demography, the balance, the population balance in Palestine, it is changing. Tens of thousands of Jews are coming in. And so around 1936, the Arabs in Palestine, they enter into revolt, what's known as the Arab Revolt. And it was the first attempt, at the beginning in particular, of massive civil disobedience in order to stop the immigration of Jews into Palestine, an immigration which they understood at some point was going to change the demographic balance in Palestine, meaning the ratio of Arabs to Jews. And then once Jews became a majority, they were quite fearful there would be no place for them in the most literal sense, that they would be asked to leave because the Jews want a state for themselves. That was the point of Zionism, to create a place where Jews would be safe among themselves. Come 1939, the British, who, as you recall, they issued the Balfour Declaration, they have a problem in their hands. They know that a war is coming with Germany, with Nazi Germany. And the British are worried that if the Arabs in the Arab world are hostile to us because of the Balfour Declaration, because we're supporting a Jewish home in Palestine, if the Arabs are hostile to us, the British say, during the war with Hitler, the Arabs may switch sides and support the Nazis. So the British say, well, we have to get rid of this Balfour Declaration. And so in 1939, the British say, no more Jewish state. We're going to hand over the territory in a few years to the Arabs. And so now the Jews feel betrayed again, that the one place that was open to them as a haven, as a refuge, that place was being lost to them. The years 1939 to 1945, I know for most of you young people in the room, 1939 to 45 sounds like the Civil War to me when I was growing up. It was actually about the same time. But those were critical years for my parents' generation and also for myself, being the offspring of my parents. During those years, the Jews suffered a massive extermination at the hands of the Nazis. There were about 7 million Jews under the control of the Nazi regime. Of those 7 million, about 5 to 6, the numbers vary a little, but it's clearly a horrendous magnitude. About 5 to 6 million Jews were exterminated. So after World War II, the Zionists are more determined than ever. We are going to get a state. Because when we were being exterminated, nobody was there for us. Either countries participated in the extermination, or they closed their borders to us when we were trying to flee. So they were determined now that whatever it took, we are getting a state. On the other hand, the Palestinian Arabs said, what did we have to do with it? We had nothing to do with the Nazi Holocaust. So why should we be forced to sacrifice our homeland, where we've lived for hundreds, if not thousands of years, because other Europeans exterminated the Jews? That doesn't make any sense. After the war, the British, who we've heard about several times, the British have a new problem. The British are broke. They have no money. The war bankrupted them. They can no longer afford their empire. They can no longer afford the troops it requires to maintain an empire. So come February 1947, the British say, we're sick of this problem in Palestine. The Jews are killing the Arabs are killing the Jews, and both of them are killing us, which was true. A lot of British troops were being shot at from both sides. So they said, we're going to take this problem, and we're going to give it to this new organization that's just been formed, and let them figure out what to do. And what was that organization called? The United Nations. And the first item, just about the first item on the agenda of the United Nations some 60 years ago was how to resolve this Palestine problem. And it was not an easy problem, because everybody seemed to have a compelling, a convincing argument. Who was right? Who was wrong? And the United Nations, they deliberated hard and long on this issue. And finally, they put forth a recommendation to the General Assembly. And the recommendation was this. They said, there is no way these two peoples are going to get along. The Jews have created their own independent state inside Palestine, about 600,000 of them. They've created institutions, economic institutions, political institutions. They have their own separate life. And there's also the Palestinian Arabs who live there and have lived there. They have their own separate life. As much as we would like for both of them to live together, as much as we would like for both of them to live together, it's just not going to work. Because the Jews are determined they want their own state. Well, the United Nations decided they're going to divide it roughly in half. Not exactly in half, roughly in half. There were about 600,000 Jews in Palestine at the time. They got about 56% of Palestine. There were about 1,200,000 or 300,000 Palestinian Arabs in Palestine. They got about 44%. Now some of you are wondering, well, you don't have to be a mathematical genius to see something is wrong there. There are 1,300,000 Arabs